He had it all: wealth, fame, and a life most people only dream of. But one single decision, made in a moment of arrogance, tore it all apart. This is not just a story about losing money. It's a haunting spiral of betrayal, deception, and a brutal lesson that even the richest can't afford to ignore. As you follow the rise and catastrophic fall of Matthew Rains, you'll question how far one mistake can truly reach. Matthew Rains wasn't born into money. Raised in the dry, unassuming suburbs of Midland, Texas, he was the son of a school librarian and a mechanic. His father, a stoic man with grease permanently etched into his fingernails, taught him the value of hard work. His mother, ever nurturing, filled the house with worn books and whispered dreams of faraway places. Matthew absorbed both, grit and imagination, qualities that would later build his empire and, tragically, become his undoing. The time he turned 34, Matthew wasn't just successful. He was iconic in the tech scene. His software company, CipherNest, specialized in ultra-secure communication systems for corporate clients. Its rise was meteoric. What began as code written in a college dorm room morphed into a sleek high-rise headquarters in downtown Austin, complete with floor-to-ceiling glass walls, weekly catered sushi, and a rooftop deck that hosted investors and influencers under the warm Texas sun. Everyone wanted a piece of Matthew Rains. The media adored him. He graced the covers of tech magazines, was invited to panels alongside Silicon Valley elites, and became a poster boy for self-made millionaires in the post-recession era. His clean-cut look, tailored suits, minimalist watches, a measured smile, hid the insomnia, the anxiety, and the pressure he endured daily to keep CipherNest not just afloat, but growing. Underneath the surface of public praise, however, cracks were forming. His co-founder, Darren Miles, was a brilliant but volatile coder with no patience for boardrooms or deadlines. Their partnership, once built on mutual ambition and trust, had frayed. Darren began missing key meetings, clashing with the CTO, and undermining decisions in front of staff. Matthew tried to smooth things over, hoping their decade-long friendship would survive the strain, but resentment was growing on both sides. Then came the money problem. CipherNest was burning cash fast, faster than anyone outside the core finance team realized. To keep up with inflated salaries, aggressive R&D, and international expansion plans, Matthew had dipped into a $6 million line of credit. He had banked on closing a Series C funding round to refill the reserves, but the market had shifted. Investors were suddenly cautious, spooked by a tech bubble whisper growing louder by the week. The pressure was suffocating. Every day he walked into an office filled with employees who looked to him as a visionary leader, unaware that behind the confident nods and encouraging speeches, Matthew was calculating how many weeks of payroll he could cover if the deal didn't come through. He avoided Darren's questions, skipped calls from creditors, and began drafting a backup plan that relied on private investors. But time was against him. One morning, after a sleepless night haunted by financial models and worst-case scenarios, Matthew stood at the edge of his office balcony. Austin buzzed below, unbothered, indifferent. He thought of his father's voice telling him to never bet more than you can afford to lose. But it was too late for that. Matthew had already bet everything. In that moment, he made a silent vow. He would save CipherNest no matter what it took. That promise, born from desperation and pride, would lead him directly into the hands of the man who would ruin him. Characters, without spaces. 3145. The email arrived on a Sunday night. Subject line: Private investment opportunity. Confidential. At first Matthew almost deleted it, suspecting spam or another cold pitch from a boutique venture firm. But something made him open it. The sender claimed to represent a firm called Halberd Equity, a name Matthew didn't recognize, and offered a $10 million investment in exchange for just 15% equity. No board seat, no operational interference, Just capital, wired fast. It sounded too good to be true. But desperation has a way of softening skepticism. That night, while the city slept and his inbox filled with polite rejections from traditional VCs, Matthew read and reread the email. The wording was professional, confident. The contact was someone named Elias Ward, who claimed to have a background in European tech acquisitions and a track record with several blockchain and AI startups. Matthew Googled him. There wasn't much, just a few obscure interviews and a LinkedIn profile that looked convincing enough. Elias had no scandals, no red flags, but also no real proof of his past successes. Still, Matthew wasn't in a position to be picky. The Series C had stalled indefinitely, and the CFO had warned him, without new capital, they wouldn't make it past Q2. The next morning, Matthew responded. A Zoom call was scheduled. Elias appeared on screen, charming, articulate, dressed in an open-collar shirt that whispered wealth without screaming it. He spoke with a faint London accent and the kind of calm confidence that only comes from knowing you're holding the stronger hand. He praised CipherNest's potential, spoke fluently about cybersecurity, and dropped the names of people Matthew knew: investors, executives, even a senator who had once tweeted about their app. I'm not interested in meddling, Elias said. I want in. You get 10 million within 10 days. No board control, no drama. Matthew hesitated. He asked for due diligence time. Elias smiled. Of course, but I'll be honest, we're moving quickly. I've seen what I need to see. The question is whether you're ready to survive or die defending a fantasy. The paperwork arrived, within 48 hours. It was thick, filled with legal jargon and standard clauses that Matthew barely skimmed. His lawyer, a mid-level corporate attorney used to handling software licensing, not equity deals, flagged a few ambiguous phrases but didn't seem alarmed. The most curious part was a clause tucked deep into the agreement. In the event of operational incapacity or persistent liquidity risk, certain decisions would transfer to a temporary executive committee appointed by the minority partner. Matthew read it twice. It seemed irrelevant. CipherNest had never missed payroll, and liquidity was, in his mind, a temporary bump. Besides, Elias had assured him they wouldn't interfere. He signed the papers 3 days later. The money hit their account that Friday. And just like that, the bleeding stopped, salaries were paid, projects resumed. Internally, no one suspected a thing. Matthew's name remained gold in the tech community, and for a brief moment, the pressure eased. Darren raised an eyebrow at the new investor but said nothing. After all, the company was alive. But in the silence that followed, something shifted. Elias stopped responding to calls. A representative from Halbert Equity began attending update meetings, quiet, observant, always noting details but offering no feedback. Matthew's instincts screamed that something was wrong. He brushed it off. Paranoia, he thought, just stress. What he didn't know was that Halbert Equity wasn't a real firm. The address on the documents led to a shell office in Luxembourg. Elias Ward didn't exist, at least not as the man Matthew had seen on camera. The money wasn't private equity. It was a vehicle, designed with one purpose: to take control when the moment was right, and that moment was rapidly approaching. What do you think of Matthew's decision so far? Would you have taken the deal in his place? Or walked away from the millions? Let us know in the comments. The beginning of the end arrived quietly, like a tremor before the quake. It started with missed projections. CipherNest's international expansion into the Singapore market, which Matthew had sold to the board as a guaranteed win, began hemorrhaging cash. Key clients backed out due to compliance issues, while legal fees to adapt to regional regulations ballooned far beyond forecast. Then came the lawsuits. A former employee, fired during a round of layoffs months prior, filed a wrongful termination suit. Then another. and another. Word got around the tech community that CipherNest was unstable. Potential partnerships evaporated. Big clients paused renewals. Cash flow thinned, and suddenly Matthew found himself borrowing again, only now, from lines of credit tied to his personal assets. And then, the clause. It wasn't dramatic. There was no courtroom scene, no heated argument. Just a letter. A legal notification from Halberd Equity, stating that under the terms of their agreement, Clause 6.4 had been triggered. Persistent liquidity risk had compromised executive function. Effective immediately, an interim committee, formed entirely by Halberd appointees, was to assume operational control until further notice. Matthew's jaw dropped. He immediately called Elias. No answer. He called Halberd's so-called liaison, who had attended meetings without speaking. The number was disconnected. Panic began to rise. He gathered his lawyers only to discover the clause was legally airtight. They had handed over control of the company, and he had signed it. In an emergency board meeting, now controlled by Halberd representatives, Matthew was asked not to attend. Darren, previously distracted and indifferent, now voiced his discontent, publicly claiming he had warned about bringing in outside capital. Matthew wasn't just being pushed aside. He was being erased. That night he returned to his penthouse overlooking Town Lake and stood alone with the city's lights shimmering below. The silence was deafening. The phones stopped ringing. His email access was revoked. His assistant, once fiercely loyal, sent a formal message declining future communications. CipherNest, the company he had built from nothing, no longer belonged to him. And then came the final blow. Weeks later, a leak surfaced in the press. CipherNest was under investigation for allegedly violating international privacy laws. The same expansion Matthew had orchestrated in Singapore was now being used to paint him as reckless, possibly even complicit in unlawful surveillance activity. Journalists ran with the story, framing him as a fallen tech mogul whose greed had finally caught up with him. He watched the coverage in stunned silence. Images of his face were splashed across news segments, clickbait headlines shouted his downfall, and former colleagues offered anonymous quotes about his mismanagement. Friends stopped responding to texts. Investors who once courted him now gave curt, legal-worded statements about ongoing restructuring. The real twist? None of the allegations stuck. But by then, it didn't matter. Reputation, like a stock price, depends on perception. And Matthews had crashed. He called his parents in tears for the first time in a decade. His mother answered, her voice trembling. "Come home," she whispered. "Whatever happened? Just come home." Matthew didn't know what scared him more, what he had lost, or what he was about to face now that everything was gone. In the days that followed, silence became Matthew's new reality. The once constant buzz of Slack notifications, investor emails, and media requests vanished. His inbox, once a battlefield of opportunity and demands, now lay dormant. He found himself checking it obsessively, hoping for a message from someone, anyone, who might still believe in him. But there was nothing. Just automated responses, unsubscribes, and rejections. He no longer had access to CipherNest's servers. His office keycard was disabled. The company car was reclaimed. His corporate credit cards were shut off. And when he walked past the new CipherNest headquarters, now stripped of his influence, the receptionist looked at him like he was a ghost, a memory. The media fed off his collapse with merciless precision. One headline read, "From Silicons, Star to Suspect, the Fall of Matthew Raines." Another, CipherNest co-founder linked to shady offshore dealings. Though none of the articles contained confirmed facts about wrongdoing, the narrative was already set. The whispers of scandal, the vague accusations, and the complex web of offshore connections planted just enough doubt to end his credibility. The truth, of course, was far worse, and far more calculated. Halbert Equity, as it turned out, had no registered financial institution backing it. After weeks of digging with a hired private investigator, Matthew learned that the money Elias Ward had invested was funneled through a series of shell corporations based in Panama, Malta, and the British Virgin Islands, all untraceable, all legal on the surface, but designed to dissolve accountability. Elias, whose real identity was still unknown, had done this before. He was a financial phantom, a corporate hitman, and Matthew had invited him in. Worse still, a forensic audit revealed that CipherNest had been quietly stripped of its most valuable intellectual property, patents and proprietary algorithms. Technology that Matthew and Darren had built over a decade had been sold to anonymous buyers. Legally, through the new executive committee. They hadn't just taken his company, they had harvested it. The fallout was devastating. Matthew's personal assets were frozen during the investigation. His condo was foreclosed. His accounts drained to pay mounting legal fees. Friends stopped returning his calls. Even his parents, supportive but overwhelmed, urged him to stay out of the media and lay low. Darren, meanwhile, negotiated a backroom deal to remain with the company under new leadership. Betrayal added a bitter sting to the already unbearable shame. There were days Matthew didn't leave his apartment. Curtains drawn, phone off, lights out. He stared at old photos. Him and Darren with their first laptops, his mother cutting the ribbon at the company's first office space, tech award nights, smiling with the illusion of permanence. And in those dark hours, he asked himself the same question over and over. Was it all worth it? Not the success, not the empire, but the blindness, the pride. The moment he looked at Elias Ward's offer and decided to trust the unknown, because the alternative, failure, was something his ego couldn't stomach. He would later describe this period as a death without a funeral. No closure. Just a slow erasure of identity, a disappearance from the world he once ruled. But the silence didn't last forever. Eventually, someone knocked at his door. A documentary filmmaker, curious, cautious, but captivated by Matthew's story. She wanted to know everything. She promised nothing would be edited to make him look good or bad, just real. For the first time, someone wasn't trying to sell him something or destroy what remained. She just wanted to listen, and that changed everything. Thank you so much for staying with us through Matthew's descent. It means more than you know. But stay with us. The final chapter will reveal the most unexpected twist of all. Flagstaff, Arizona. Far from the glass towers of Austin and the digital battlefields of venture capital, Matthew Rains now lives in a one-bedroom apartment above a pawn shop. The air is thinner here, colder. The pace of life slower, marked by the distant hum of freight trains and the creak of wooden stairs in an old building no one notices. No one recognizes him here. He walks to the same diner every morning, orders black coffee and toast, and spends hours journaling with the discipline of a monk. The locals think he's some kind of retired professor or burnt-out writer. Only a few know his real name. None know the full story. And that's how he prefers it. The documentary, released on a modest independent channel, didn't go viral, but it found an audience. People who had lost everything. Entrepreneurs destroyed by their own hubris. Victims of silent corporate wars. The comments flooded in. I've lived this. Thank you for telling the truth. I thought I was alone. For Matthew, that changed something fundamental. He realized his story, stripped of its pride and pain, could serve as a warning. Not a tale of defeat, but of clarity. In his words, I didn't lose everything because I failed. I lost everything because I refused to believe I could. It wasn't the betrayal that undid him. It was the belief that success meant invincibility. Now, he teaches quietly, off the grid, through anonymous mentorship forums, private Zoom calls with startup founders and ghost-written blog posts, he helps others see what he once couldn't. The cracks beneath the surface, the cost of unchecked ambition, the predators dressed as partners. He no longer seeks redemption. He knows some doors, once closed, never open again. Cyphernest went public under a new name, and its success continues, absent his vision. Darren is a senior executive now, praised for his turnaround leadership. The world rewrites history quickly. But in the solitude of his nights, Matthew allows himself one ritual. He revisits the original prototype for Cyphernest, version 0.1. A bare-bones encryption app, crude and inefficient, but pure, untouched by greed, untouched by ambition. Just lines of code written by two friends who believed in something. Sometimes he stares at it for hours, not with regret, but with reverence. He talks to no one about Elias Ward anymore. There's no point. Some phantoms aren't meant to be hunted. The FBI took interest, but nothing came of it. The money trail vanished like vapor. Halberd equity dissolved before it ever existed. No convictions, no press, just silence. In one of his final interviews, Matthew was asked if he could go back. Would he change anything? He smiled, but not with joy. "I'd read the damn contract," he said, "and I'd listened to the silence more carefully. It always speaks louder than applause." Now he lives with ghosts. The ghost of who he was, the ghost of what he built, and the ghost of a single, fatal mistake. But those ghosts no longer haunt him. They remind him. And sometimes that's enough. This story is a brutal reminder that even the most brilliant among us can be brought down by a single oversight. A sentence buried in a contract. A moment of pride. A misjudged character. But beyond the fall, there's reflection, and sometimes redemption in the form of wisdom. What would you have done in Matthew's place? Let us know in the comments. If this story made you think, subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories like this. And don't miss the next video we've handpicked for you. It's even more unbelievable than this one.